All right, folks, mercifully the final time here on the LA Sparks 365 Network. I have not moved out of this chair since 10 o'clock tonight, and my rear is not giving me the time of day right now, folks. With that, though, folks, all I've done is change T-shirts all 4 shows and still got the bling on, though, for the next 20 minutes here as we do. Welcome in, folks, to Sparks 365, the 2015 LA Sparks season preview here on LAS 365, of course. Once more, again, we're joined by Chris Mancy from the Internet Studios up in Anaheim, California. And, of course, for the 4th and final time tonight, Cal McClurk here from Studio 121 in San Diego. All right, Chris. Last time tonight, man, now I know why, Chris, we don't do 4 shows in one night anymore like we used to because of the wear and tear on the body this is, man. How you holding up tonight?
Nothing much, just can't wait until season opener in 20 minutes.
Well, Chris, now down to 19 minutes until the home opener. With that, folks, we will quickly preview the 2015 Sparks season, talk about some of the moves made, some of the teams that they'll play on the schedule this year, and, of course, everything else going forward. Now, of course, Chris, after a year that saw the Sparks in, Chris, possibly going to the Bay Area, all the the off season, Chris, and then, of course, mangled in a very turbulent and a very, very sour season last year where the Sparks, again, Chris, finished 16-18, tied for third, but fell to 4th place because of tiebreakers and were ousted in the first round by the eventual champion Phoenix Mercury in the first round of the postseason. Chris, as you kind of think back, man, to last year, of course, the offseason was one deal, man, but of course, Chris, your final thoughts on the 2014 season in regards to of how the Sparks never got hot, and this wasn't the same team we saw in 2013 where they were, playing so great, had a couple of bad stretches, but of course picked up games where they, where they had a lot of great, where they played great, but of course Chris ultimately fell though in the first round again in 2013. Your thoughts though, Chris, about last year more so than the 2013 season going forward?
This is because they weren't moving anywhere until last year. They thought they were going to move up to the Bay Area or it got folded, and afterwards they just had a great, not terrible season.
Chris, I think that also, man, last year was was a year, man, also where you saw the coaching staff get blown out mid-season. And, of course, Chris, I thought that we were probably going to wait until the season ended before they would make some type of coaching overturn, Chris. But so they waited until after the All-Star game ended in mid-July when they, tossed Carol Ross to the curb and also let Gail Gustenkor's also follow her out because of her allegiance to Carol Ross, Chris. And of course, Chris, they moved up GM and VP, Chris. They moved Penny Toller, who had 0 coaching experience in her entire career and tenure, to the head coaching position, Chris, and brought back age veteran Steve Smith to be the assistant coach, Chris. Chris, do you think, though, that the coaching change helped or hurt the Sparks, knowing it was a coaching change, Chris, with a coach that had no experience, but also, Chris, mid-season as well on top of that?
Yeah, I think probably with the firing and with Penny Toller with no coaching, they just played out there with no heart and just let it all out there.
Now, Chris, in spite of Penny having no experience coaching, Chris, she did lead the Sparks to a 6-6 record in her tenure, so 500 finishing there. So, of course, Chris, as the offseason begins, Chris, the Sparks do name Brian Agler their new head coach. Again, as we know, Chris, Brian, the winningest coach in professional women's basketball history, a 2010 champion with the Seattle Storm, of course, ran through the playoffs rampantly with Lauren Jackson and Sue Bird in 2010. Chris, when the Sparks hired Brian Agler, your initial thoughts were what when you heard about the news?
The what?
Initial thoughts about Brian Agler being hired.
Very great, because since he has a championship entire with Seattle Storm, and just very great.
Then, of course, Chris, over the free agent period, of course, Chris, the Sparks waive Armenti Harrington, waive Lindsey Harding, let Candace Williams go via free agency. And of course, Chris, they bring in, a lot of, Chris, a lot of international flavor on the roster this year. Chris, of course, Anna Debovic from Serbia. Of course, they bring in Mariana Tolo from Australia. A lot of other foreign players. But of course, Chris, the bigger move, though, Chris, the Sparks signing Aaron Phillips to a long-term 4-year max contract for her to be in Los Angeles. And of course, Chris, we know how nice and how great of a person Aaron is off the floor. But of course, Chris, what Aaron brings to the court, though, Chris, I believe gives the Sparks a major boost going forward. Of course, with of course, Chris, the area of the Sparks were so dreadful in last year. 3-point shooting, and of course, Chris, Aaron Phillips has made a name for herself being that 3-point shooter, Chris. What move, Chris, either a player being waived or a signing, Chris, what move, intrigued you the most that the Sparks made this off season, and why?
I say Aaron Phillips because since she won 2 titles with Indiana and last season with the Phoenix Mercury, and wherever she's gone, she's won a championship, and yeah.
Now, Chris, off the court, there is one minor little situation the Sparks have themselves caught in, Chris. And, of course, man, it's the bigger story with the Sparks. Again, being without Candace Parker until the All-Star break due to rest. Now, also, Chris, what I've also been told as well, Chris, Parker is currently not under contract for the season. So, Chris, even though she's not signed, Chris, she cannot negotiate or be traded to another team because her rights are held onto by the Sparks while she is not playing, Chris. While she's not playing, Chris, she cannot go to another team because of the WNBA core player designation rule, Chris. So in your mind, Chris, how big of an absence, of course, does Candace Parker have on the Sparks going forward, knowing, man, that her presence is not going to be felt until July 21st when the Sparks play their first game after the All-Star game against the Mercury at home?
Just very great because she'll be rested, and when she comes back, she'll be ready to go to get the Sparks rolling after the All-Star break.
Now, again, folks, like I said, again, Candace Parker, by the way, is not on the roster. She is not currently signed to the Sparks roster. But even though she's not signed, folks, Parker cannot negotiate and or be traded to another club because her rights are held onto by the Sparks per the WNBA core player designation. So again, Parker cannot leave LA and or be traded from LA because her rights are held onto, and she is under core player designation, which means she is untouchable by other teams, and she cannot be moved or touched by other teams in the league. Now, Chris, of course, man, the 2015 season kicks off tomorrow in about 12 minutes up in Seattle against the Seattle Storm. Chris, they'll see the Storm. Their first 2 games of the year, tomorrow and next Sunday, of course. Chris, we all know about next Sunday with it being the network, meaning Green Night. But Chris, is it a bit fitting though, man, or a little funny, Chris, or as we would say, Chris, cruel irony that Brian Agler's first game with the Sparks is against the team he was coaching last season? Is that a little cruel irony for you, man, seeing that happening, or what?
Yeah, just cruel irony.
I mean, Chris, it's bad enough, man, that the Padres have to play the Padres have to play the Mariners every interleague series. The Angels, of course, have to play the Mariners every time because they're in the same division, and of course, they opened up with Seattle this year, Chris. So obviously, nothing new there with the Sparks opening up with the Seattle Storm. Then, of course, folks, looking at the schedule for the Sparks this season, of course, the Sparks have all the home games listed, folks, via a homestand. So, of course, the first homestand will feature Seattle, Minnesota, and Connecticut. Then a 3-game road trip to Connecticut, to Washington, Connecticut, and New York, followed by a 3-game homestand with San Antonio, Tulsa, and Phoenix in July, followed up by another 3-game road trip to Tulsa, to San Antonio, Tulsa, and Seattle, back home with Atlanta, Phoenix, and New York, then another road trip to Minnesota, Chicago, and San Antonio, back home for Minnesota, Tulsa, before being back on the road once more to Seattle and then back home for Seattle, Chicago, and Indiana. Back on the road to Phoenix, San Antonio, Indiana, and Tulsa for a 4-game trip. And then wrapping up the season with San Antonio at home, Washington home, and then their last home game of the year is on Sunday, September the 6th versus Tulsa at 2 p.m. And, of course, the last 2 games on the road at Atlanta and at Phoenix at 7 o'clock. Now, Chris, in my mind, Chris, the Sparks will have to start the year above 500 because, Chris, they were only above 500, I believe, one time all of last season. That was when they were 2-1 after the month of May when they played those 3 games in May, Chris. Chris, in your mind, how important is it for LA to get off to a plus 500 start for the season this year? Again, knowing that there is no Parker and no Tolliver for a while this year.
I think that's what too. Very great and tough task. You need to get off to a great start without Parker. Sitting out until the All-Star break.
So again, folks, the roster real quick. Again, folks, no Parker until the All-Star break. No Chris Tolliver, no Tolliver for the first 8 games, and no Anna Debovic too. They're both fulfilling international obligations with their respective clubs over in Serbia and in Slovakia right now at this point in time. Now, of course, Chris, as we know, man, we will be getting 25 more games on local TV, of course, folks, with Time Warner Cable Sportsnet, bringing you 25 LA Sparks games home and away with Jim Watson and Mary Murphy on the call those games. And, of course, now, folks, that brings me to a very, very important point, folks. A very important programming television note for you folks. Now, in spite of the game being at 6 p.m. tomorrow night, the Sparks game will not be shown live on Time Warner Cable Sportsnet due to a scheduling conflict because the LA Galaxy have a 7:30 p.m. home game on television against Vancouver that will be shown live. You will be able to watch the Sparks game live and in full at 10:30 Pacific tomorrow night on television. So, of course, Chris, as you know, man, I know that last year I blew up because of the TV issue with the WNBA, Chris. Of course, man, no games on TV tonight on ESPN2 or on NBA TV. But, Chris, in your mind, though, are you a little bit shocked or surprised that the Sparks first game would not be shown live because of a other game being shown on television on Sportsnet at all, Chris, or no?
Pretty much, yeah. Because it's season opener and not going to be shown live.
Chris, I'm sure you're thinking that I would say yeah to this, Chris. But frankly, man, I'm not. Frankly, Chris, I'm not surprised at all, Chris, because it's not the Sparks' home opener. Had it been like last year, where the Storm game was shown live because there was no booking, Chris. I'm not, Chris. Frankly, I am not really upset about this, Chris, because if this was the Sparks' home opener not being shown live, of course we would be irate. But Chris, with it being an away game, and of course the Galaxy being at home, Chris, I can see. I sort of been like, okay, I see why they did that. So again, folks, Sparks and Storm game will not be shown live on local TV on TWCSN or TWCD because again, the Galaxy have a game tomorrow night at 7:30 p.m. that will be shown live on there. You can see the Sparks game live and in full, tape delayed at 10:30 p.m. Pacific, 1:30 a.m. Eastern on Time Warner Cable Sportsnet, and of course also on Time Warner Cable Deportes. So again, just keep that in mind as you folks may plan for tomorrow. But again, Sparks game not being shown live on television. Will be shown live at 10:30 following the Galaxy Whitecaps game on TWCSN. Chris, other than the home opener, Chris, when we see Seattle, is there one team that you're looking forward to seeing the Sparks play the most on television and or in person this year, other than Seattle, Chris? Who is that team and why?
The other one?
I want to get this one. But you said they'll probably have about 8.
I don't know.
If I had to pick another team to watch, there's 2 of them, one in the West, one in the East, Chris. If I had to really see 2 teams, Chris, again, Chris, I got to go with the longtime rivals. I got to go with both the Merc and with the Liberty, Chris, because of what we know of what these three of these four teams, Chris, mean to the integrity, obviously. And, of course, Chris, anytime the Sparks play the Mercury, Chris, it's always a great game. You're always on the edge of your seat, regardless if you're cheering for Phoenix or for LA, Chris. You're entrenched. You're getting heart attacks, strokes, cardiac arrest because the games always come down to the wire. And, of course, Chris, I'm anxious to see, Chris, how both teams play each other without Taurasi, Taylor, and Parker. And, of course, Chris, with the Liberty, of course, as you know, with the long-standing rivalry with Bill Laimbeer, with both the Lakers and the Sparks, Chris, and, of course, seeing, Swin Cash and Candace Wiggins playing. Chris, I think, man, that I would probably say the Mercury, Chris, because of the rivalry, but also, Chris, do you think, though, man, that there's a bit, Chris, in your mind, though, let's kind of talk about this, Chris. Again, Sparks will face the Mercury the first time, Chris, on July 5th. Chris, will it be a bit different seeing these two teams play without their star players playing in that game?
Yeah. Since Diana Taurasi and Candace Parker will not be in the game.
So, folks, it'll be a very interesting July 5th. Again, folks, the Sparks will face the Mercury the first time this year, July 5th at Staples at 2 p.m. But again, folks, reminder, no Candace Parker, no Diana Taurasi, and also no Penny Taylor for both those clubs. So, obviously, that'll be a very, very interesting game, to say the least. And we'll see how that result does turn out. But again, folks, the Sparks and Storm will open up the 2015 campaign at 6 p.m. tomorrow night, soon to be today. But again, folks, Sparks and Storm and Chris, real quick as well, man, a quick injury update, folks. But again, Nneka Ogwumike spotted yesterday by team photographers in a walking boot on her left ankle. Again, some of that injury on Wednesday against the Sun in that preseason game again where it took a pretty nasty fall, and it seemed to sprain her ankle. So again, hopefully she'll be 100%. And Chris, obviously, man, I know that we don't want to go too far ahead of us, but Chris, obviously, man, I mean, if Nneka's out for Game 1, Chris, I mean, that, in my mind, Chris, that spells disaster. I mean, because you already have, or you're down one puzzle piece, Chris. Then if you're down option B, Chris, it's like, who can step up now other than Lav to fill the void, Chris, if Nneka either doesn't play well or probably does not play because of the injury, Chris. I mean, right now, Chris, any early concern about Nneka possibly being off and or not playing tomorrow because of the injury?
Probably, perhaps, not playing.
Now, again, folks, the good news out of this, though, again, Nneka only suffered a minor sprain, so again, we'll see how good she can be tomorrow. But again, folks, Sparks and Storm to tip off the 2015 WNBA season for the Sparks and Storm, again, tomorrow night at 6 p.m. You can catch the game tape delayed on Time Warner Cable Sports, and again, the tape delayed broadcast coming up at 10:30 p.m. And, of course, Chris, the other game that we're looking forward to the most, other than the home opener, Chris, of course, is August 30th, when the Sparks will look to set a brand new attendance record for a WNBA game in attendance when they try to set the record at 22,000 fans at the ball game when the Sparks take on the San Antonio Stars on Sunday, August 30th at 2 o'clock p.m. Chris, as I know that we said this, man, a while back where, of how great the block party was, Chris, but also, man, of how great this campaign has been for the female community in LA, Chris, of empowering them to, come to the games. Because we said this, man, during the last show, I want to say, we were talking about the block party, Chris. Chris, you mind, man, because I know you saw, man, how great, Chris, not only was the block party, but also, Chris, how great is this campaign that the Sparks putting forward, Chris, to really empower and bring the female fans into the games this year at Staples Center?
You get out the phone, I'm going to show you. It's all I need.
Look, very, very great.
So again, folks, for more information on this amazing campaign, again, folks, please visit LASparks.com/wearewomen for more information and updates. But again, folks, that game against Sparks and Stars, August 30th, 2015, 2 o'clock tip-off again, as the Sparks look to set the record for 22,000 fans at the game, the most attended game in WNBA history. With that, folks, on the eve of a new season, a new journey begins with only one goal in mind, and that's winning the franchise's third WNBA championship in the franchise's illustrious 19-year history. Please be there to witness it all. Sparks and Storm again, 6 o'clock tip-off. Catch the game tape delayed at 10:30 p.m. on Time Warner Cable Sportsnet. Chris, we get ready to have for the night, man. Your final thoughts on tonight's 4-show lineup, Chris, and also about the season getting underway tomorrow.
Hey, Mom, good job.
Just can't wait. Long,
Coffee. Hey, Mom,
great show. And just can't wait.
Hey, Mom, good.
On the eve of a new season, a new journey begins and a new dawn begins. Which, of course, folks, is the only goal in mind this season, and that is capturing a third WNBA championship for the city of Los Angeles and for the 19-year history of the LA Sparks. Be there to witness it all. Sparks and Storm tonight at 10:30 Pacific. Tape delayed again on TWCSN. With that, folks, have a safe night. Drive home safely. Thank you all for coming. Try to get some sleep and rest easy. And good night now. This has been the LA Sparks 365 Network. We are Sparks. We are LA. We are the WNBA. We'll see folks back here to recap the Sparks game against the Storm tomorrow night, while we also recap the rest of the games across the league tomorrow, back here on LAS 365. Until tomorrow night, folks, for Chris Mancy up in Anaheim, Cal Whitaker signing off. See you folks tomorrow night, and enjoy the game. Bye-bye.